Moving ahead, our next session is the leadership dialogue on how Maharashtra's largest energy consumers are shaping the future of power demand. For that, I would like to invite our moderator, Dr. Kiran Somuvanshi, journalist, writer and visiting professor, ex-Economic Times, and our panelists, Avinash Joshi, Executive Managing Director, India Entity Data, Dr. Atul Kharate, Chief Operating Officer, Indian Oil Adani Ventures Limited, and K.R. Venkatadri, former CCO, Tata Chemicals. A round of applause for our moderator and speakers.
Also kind of underscored the importance of power. I'm sure all of us through the country realized how much power we consume, especially when the climate change is happening. And today's discussion is that way topical because it is about energy consumption and how we are looking at, especially from the state of Maharashtra, the kind of consumption that we are looking at. One is, I come from the state and it's one of the most industrialized ones. We are looking at reaching 1 trillion economy. And, as we prosper, we also will consume more and more energy. So, prosperity and consumption of energy goes hand in hand. Plus the factor of climate change. So that is also going to kind of change the way we consume and need energy to kind of supplement our different needs. So at this juncture, this deliberation of how we are consuming, the challenges that we will face, and how are we planning to meet these challenges, I think that is an important discussion to have. And I'm happy to have a very motley bunch of panelists coming from different industries because power consumption is quite diverse and power consumers are also equally diverse. And we have some of the largest consumers in this state. And this panel is actually representing consumers as well as production. One of the panelists also is representing the facilitation of production of energy. So we need to understand from both the sides, how is energy being, created, used, and planned for the future. So let me introduce you to our panelists, largely. So we have with us Mr. Avinash Joshi. He is Executive Managing Director, India of Entity Data. Data centers are one of the most glamorous and most flogged industry right now. And it is interesting to hear from him, what kind of perspectives the industries have. We also have Dr. Atul Kharate. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Indian Oil Adani Ventures Limited. Now that's a company which is facilitating, the infrastructure building for the oil and gas industry. So they are kind of, from the production side, and it will be important to see that what is happening on that count to be able to, meet the demand that is coming from the consumption side. And next to me, I have Mr. K.R. Venkatadri. He is the former Chief Commercial Officer of Tata Chemicals, important manufacturing, industry, and chemicals industry anyway is huge power consumer. So I would like to know from all of them, different aspects of energy consumption, and I hope it is interesting for all of you also to listen in. So coming to the, first questions, the elephant in the room. How are you all from different industries, looking at power consumption, the requirement, and the challenges involved in meeting those requirements? If we can go, whichever order. Maybe from the production side first.
Good morning, all of you. And on behalf of the entire panel, many compliments to Bombay Chambers on completion of 190 years. That's really a great achievement. And still, we can see a lot of activities on their planning in terms of how can they really engage with industry, collaborate with the government, and really add value to all of us, like as an industry, like academia, etc. Talking about the opening remarks for this session, since I represent the oil and gas industry, this venture is an equal joint venture of Indian Oil Corporation and Adani Ports and SEZ. I think both companies are quite familiar in terms Indian Oil being the largest marketer of oil and gas in the country, covering around 46% of the oil and gas market in various segments like petroleum, LPG, petrochemicals, etc. And Adani is an Indian multinational who is having a presence in 15 ports of the country and 5 international ports today. Talking about the segment, because of the, I think, the current crisis situation with the backdrop of global war, which is happening in and around from last couple of months largely, and prior to that also Ukraine, Russia has also a big hit in the whole supply chain arrangement of the country. If I have to set an outlook for the nation, we need to reflect upon and just see that petroleum product demand in a developing country like India has been growing by almost 4 to 5%. When we come to product segmentation, the LPG and gas demand is growing by average 6%. The coal, which is also a major source of energy for the power generation as well as to the industry and commercial, that has been growing by 6 to 7% from last more than 5 years of time. Downstream, if you see, the requirement of LPG, the city gas distribution, that has been also highly in demand. So, when it comes to a very national scenario, it means the country like India need more and more sources of energy. And the other side, we are importing around 85% of the crude for India. And that is how we are the third largest oil and gas country on the global scale. So quite an, I can say, a challenging situation when you are 85% import dependent and your demand is so exponentially high. In spite of the global situation in last couple of months and many years, I think we have been managing it well. It's a real challenge not only for the petroleum department, but this is having a very high impact on the whole import, export and economic management of the country, because when you are such an import dependent, crude we talked about 85% import dependency, natural gas we are importing 52%, LPG we are importing close to 60%, and there are coal even we are importing at large scale. So which is having a huge impact on your foreign investment funds, foreign kitties. I think it's important not only in the current situation, but we need to set it well from the longer perspective. What is a plan for country in terms of next 5 years? Maybe a 10-year span and maybe another 25 years of span, where we can see that 87% of import dependent country, how can we bring it down to 50% of the import, so that you will be a better negotiator, you will have a very better position in terms of negotiating with the suppliers for the nation. I think we'll have a more discussion in the next session. At this stage, I am taking pause here.
Yeah, thanks for those all headline numbers, critical at a time that we are talking. Over to you, Mr. Joshi.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran. And I do want to thank Chamber for having me here today for expressing my point of view here. Just to share a little bit about what we do as a company, a Japanese heritage, more than 100 years into the business, and in India specifically around since 1993. Look at us as telecom plus IT services company, and data center happens to be major part of our business. Coming back to the specific question about the energy consumption, and we being a data center company, amongst other things, naturally we are the largest consumer of few things. One of them is energy, other actually being steel, because of the construction requirement. You talked about data center as a glamorous business, but when you actually are building the data center, it's not so glamorous. It requires a lot of different aspects to work together. Once it is opened, obviously it becomes very swanky. Coming back to data center, so India right now, give and take, has a data center capacity of about 1.5 gigawatt. Out of that 1.5, and I mean in the data center now the capacity is always being measured in terms of energy consumption, which is a significant change. But in that 1.5 megawatt capacity what we have, maybe roughly about 400 megawatt has 1.5 gigawatt. Out of that, 400 megawatt probably has come in last 2 years. The expectation is that this 1.5 gigawatt of capacity today will go to about 4 to 5 gigawatt in next 3 years' time. So you can imagine that in 3 years' time it is going to get triple in terms of the capacity requirement. And when you look at, almost 20% of data globally gets created in India because of the consumption, consumers, the telco policies, so on and so forth, right? However, the 20% of data which gets created in India, the capacity of data centers in India is less than 5%. So you can imagine how much headroom is available actually for the data centers in the Indian context. And then add to that few other things, the data localization, geopolitical issues, data sovereignty. So I expect that the data center demand will continue to grow, and given that it consumes so much energy, from our standpoint, what we really look for is availability of power, for sure, because it is a 24/7. We heard some time back, you can't even, so to speak, accept 30 seconds of outage, right? Most of the critical workloads nowadays are on the data center. So availability of power, quality of power, that's one of the reasons I think why Maharashtra has taken a leading position in terms of the data center. In spite of having a real estate cost not very cheap, but because of the availability and quality of power, Maharashtra has probably a lion's share of data center capacity, and within that Mumbai has lion's share of data center capacity, almost 40%. And third, I think, is the speed at which this infrastructure can come up, because with AI coming in, the requirement of energy is now growing exponentially. Earlier, the typical data centers used to be, maybe 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 15 megawatt. Now, the AI data center starts with minimum 100 megawatt with an, expansion availability of at least 500 megawatt. So the scale at which the data center capacities are also going is phenomenally high, and that consumes energy. So just to come to what I was trying to say is, I think the quality, availability, and the speed at which this can be made available as an energy becomes super critical for the data center business.
Right. So big numbers and big projections. From the new age industry, let me come to traditional manufacturing demand. And with Make in India, how are we looking at taking care of our energy requirements?
Thank you. At the outset, let me thank BCCI for organizing this program, a very, very critical part of it. If India has to achieve its long-term goals, I think we have quite a bit of human talent. There is obviously quite a bit of entrepreneurial capability within the country, and there are also good set of investors. But what is going to be critical for this country to reach all the manufacturing goals is going to be energy. So I think I would say that it's a very critical part. Let me talk from the perspective of chemical industry, which is something, which I have spent quite some time. Now at the outset, I think, with this China Plus One happening, India is benefiting quite a lot on getting manufacturing. Second thing is there that when we say chemicals, we tend to think of only certain things as chemicals. Now today, if we are talking about building a semiconductor or EV factory, which are all the modern age things, actually all of them are chemicals. So if we need to have all those industries come up in this country, we need to have a very strong chemical industry. That's the backbone of most of the other, the downstream part. Now, what is going to happen is there that we are going to see an explosion of manufacturing, and that's something evident. The important part of it is there that chemical industries require a different set of, a tighter set of requirements in terms of power. Now, we are used to, in our country, power going out and stuff like that. So one is, we have typically been talking quite a lot about, infrastructure projects to set up 10 megawatts or 10 gigawatts, 20 gigawatts. But for a chemical factory, what is also important is the reliability of power, the quality of power, the consistency of voltage, stuff like that. Just imagine in a chemical factory, for example, you're making ammonia or you're making any chloroalkali. If the plant goes down by, see, one is of course, as my colleague Mr. Avinash mentioned, a data center, an outage for 10 seconds, the whole world starts screaming that the internet is down. Along with that, in a chemical manufacturing industry, if a power goes off for 10 to 15 minutes, an ammonia factory or a chloroalkali factory, most of us may not even know about it because as users, but it can be a potential safety hazard. There could be explosions, there could be runaway reactions. So it's very crucial for having a very clean, reliable, and a steady supply of power. Now, one of the things that, which is also crucial, let me also talk about it, that most often than not, we tend to focus on setting up huge infrastructure. But today, what is important for Maharashtra to definitely do that, as a very progressive state that we are in, is the last mile connectivity. The interstate connection that we need to have, because different states have different power requirements and they do share with each other. The open access policies. So what is important is these are very crucial things to focus on, since there are, we are also going to put up a policy paper to the state government. So how do you make sure that the transmission grids are reliable? How do we make sure open access is taken care of? How do we make sure that the interstate transmission, that takes place, if Gujarat has access, Maharashtra may need something, so how to give and take, how do we give all of that? These are going to be very, very crucial, and clean power, which is consistent with minimal voltage fluctuations and frequency, consistency are going to be very crucial.
Interesting points, you brought out from the safety and the consistency point of view. Now let me, go industry-wise in the sense, Dr. Kharate, I would like to know, how are you looking at in terms of capacity creation? Because oil and gas is still, hard to abate sector from the sustainability point of view at a time when globally we are looking at the transition to clean power. Oil and gas still looks like the villain in the story. So how is that industry looking at transitioning? Are we kind of increasing capacities? And if we are increasing, where is the scope in India, especially in Maharashtra, when we are talking about the Ratnagiri refinery? Are we going to see it coming up? And how are we, going ahead, how do you see these things happening?
I think first from the outlook point of view, when we are such a heavily import dependent, we have to have short-term and long-term plan in place. So in those direction, maybe first pillar could be a gas-based economy. So we are currently 6.8% of the gas presence in the energy pie. So that we wanted to increase to 15%. And that is how more import infrastructure for the country. Having a more downstream pipeline of the natural gas in the country. And CGD largely we need to promote it. I think state has a very important role in terms of promoting the CGD. How can we really make it more effective in terms of faster implementation? A lot of energy and time we are wasting in terms of the permitting system in the state. ROW issues are not getting resolved. We talked about single window system largely, but how effective is it? So that will add a lot of value to the gas segment, and thereby you will also reduce your import dependency on LPG, which is a very economically beneficial at national level. So we are in such a crisis for LPG, we have seen it in last couple of months. So we have to have a very top priority plan in place. How can we optimize on LPG? Okay. When we talk about the large term approach, I think the strategic storages in the country, that could be another good initiative. We only have a couple of strategic storages, all put together 8.5 million metric ton for a big nation for India, which is not advisable. It is just a 9-10 days of stock for the country. For the country like India, with such an potential, we need to at least develop 3 to 4 weeks of stock. That means another 15 to 20 million metric ton of strategic storages, we need to build it in next 5 to 10 years of span. And those are heavy capex investment models. We need to also have a very innovative approach in terms of putting capex here. If you just try to engage it, a PP investment or a government investment only for the emergency situation, nobody will be ready to put a capex. So we have to realistic to that fact. You have to make it a model which is workable in terms of commercial aspect, so that the investor will have an ROI. So I think that can be planned at strategic level. Third segment could be alternate and new sources of energy or the green resources of energy, whereby we can see compressed biogas or waste to energy. This is largely low-hanging fruits. Today at national level, we have around 220 CBG plants up and running. Another 250 to 270 are in the process of construction. But these 400, 500 numbers doesn't really meet the requirement of country or any of the states. So there is potential to at least triple it. Under the Satat scheme, we have planned for 5,000 number of such installation. But let us forget about that number for some point of time. At least we have to plan for 1,500 numbers of compressed biogas or waste to energy plant in next 5 years of span. That will add lot of value to the gas segment. And we have seen that each segment is equally important for a larger nation like us. We can't really dependent on only solar or only wind. We need multiple resources of energy because the demand is quite substantial. Other segment like ethanol is getting blended some point of time, 20%. Then what about the other fuels like diesel? Till date, there is no success in terms of a scalable operation for the diesel blending, which can also add value to the economy as well as which can also add value to the environmental factors. I think there we have to put a lot of efforts for the R&D activities in terms of how can industry, academia and policy makers can come together and they can find a solution there. We can talk about methanol, we can talk about hydrogen, many other things. But I think the message is, for such a huge consuming country, we need multiple resources of energy. And you touched upon refinery in Maharashtra. I think I'm not really authorized person to talk about that. The government representative and the people sitting in chair, they only can talk about it. But my humble thoughts in terms of energy professional, see, we are having a refining capacity of 245 million metric ton today. Okay, and India can be a production center for the petroleum products in future. So we need to position our refineries in such a way that these refineries are compatible to be a petrochemical refineries in the coming days, so that you will be a real manufacturing hub for the globe. I think with that approach, we need refineries. In the current situation, as I was mentioning earlier, the demand of petroleum product is growing at rapid speed. To meet that demand, we also need refinery. What could be the capacity, what could be the configuration and technical design, that need to be thought of well in advance, considering that it is going to serve a larger part of the world, and India will be our processing center for those refineries. As Venkatesh ji was mentioning about the increasing demand of chemicals and specialty chemicals in the country. So we need to design our refineries so that they can also meet the petrochemical grade of requirement of the country. We are one of the third largest in terms of chemical consumption today. We are going to position us in terms of next after China in the petrochemical as well. So petrochemical will also become a manufacturing hub for the globe by way of India. So we have to cautious about this thing. I will also have a thought that instead of planning for 160 million metric ton refinery at one compact place, why can't we plan it in phase-wise manner? Okay. There are refineries in the country today like Bathinda refinery in Punjab. The product and crude for Bathinda refinery is flowing all the way from Gujarat's Mundra port to Bathinda, which is a more than 700 kilometer of distance. The IOCL's refinery of Mathura, Panipat is being fed by pipeline, cross-country pipeline. So those are also proven examples. So that means if there are challenges and issues in the Konkan part of Maharashtra, the Maharashtra is quite a big territory. Nagpur is also available, Chandrapur is available, Gadchuri is available. So there are multiple places available which we can think it from the point of view of having an hinterland refinery of the optimum capacity. So that you will have an investment in the state, you will have an large scale and long-term approach for this compatible refineries in the country.
So over the next decades, we still see, oil and gas going kind of very strong as an industry.
So the way there are predictions are there, it's my own views. You may have different thoughts, but I can clearly see that this journey for India is very vital. We cannot stop our infrastructure development and the growth of the country for the cost of any XYZ so-called sustainable initiatives. We are definitely part of the sustainable journey. We are committed to that. India is only country who is right on the path of G20 commitment, G8 commitment, global biofuel alliances. We are the leaders, and we have been consistent in terms of what we have been delivering. That is how I think the renewable target which Pathakji was talking about, we met it a couple of years before the deadline. But at the same time, it's equally important for us to ensure the economic and other developmental part of the country. Once we meet that, we are largely open for the globalization and the added initiatives which the European part of the world wanted us to implement.
This reminded me of, my school science project, which was on renewable energy, where we all students got together and showed different options of energy production. That project was relevant at that time and we won the prize, but it's kind of, ought to see that 35 years, 40 years down the line, we are still talking about the relevance of renewable energy and we are still moving towards it. Good or bad, but that's the way of things is. So coming to, data centers, the kind of consumption numbers you talked about, and we all understand the importance of AI and data centers, and we would want the employment generation to happen, the capacities to come in. But given the footprint, the carbon footprint, the pollution angle of the data center, it's something that we want to have, but we don't want to have it in our backyard. So it's like the necessary evil. So how does an industry like that think about being Atmanirbhar, so to say, as far as the power requirement is concerned, so that people don't look at it as a necessary evil?
Yeah. I think the renewable energy is even more relevant today than probably what it was 30 years back when we all were doing science project. The data center operators industry, right? There are a couple of things being done. One is on the consumption side. So for example, now there are new technologies available to reduce the demand for the energy. Most of the time, there is a factor in data center called PUE, which is the IT load versus total load versus the IT load. And in old days, that PU factor used to be probably 1.6, 1.7. What it means is that out of the total energy what you are consuming, let's say if it is 100, then almost 40% of that was going for the overheads, not the real workload, which is a server, storage, whatever, computer workload, right? Over a period of time, both the technologies have improved, and also I think certain decisions we all continue to take. For example, there is a concept called liquid immersion cooling. So essentially, you get all the IT gear and you deep that into a liquid. And those are those technologies available. So that reduces the consumption significantly, right? The power consumption and the power requirement. There are now technologies where you do in-rack cooling. So in the server racks, those racks itself now have a cooling mechanism right all the way up to the chip. So I think that's another way to reduce the demand for energy, right? Have a flexible design of data center, which means at any point in time, depending on the workload, you can introduce these new technologies without really having to change the data center design. So as a result of that, the PU factor, which used to be 1.6, 1.5, now probably it started coming down to 1.3, 1.4. I mean, the most ideal is 1, but which is like literally zero overload and everything goes on to the IT load. Some of the hyperscalers now, because of the scales involved, you can get a PU factor of now maybe 1.2, which is very efficient way of doing. So one is, I think, taking all the actions to make it most efficient so that the demand itself or the consumption itself is lower, right? So that's one aspect. I think the second is, for example, we have our own solar energy and wind energy plants in Maharashtra and Karnataka, and we feed to the grid to make it carbon neutral. Our own commitment is by 2030 we should be net neutral or zero in all our data center operations. We have gone publicly saying that 100% of our energy will be from renewable resources by 2030. So I think these are some actions we are also taking, and now we will have to look at, back to what Dr. Atul said, we have to look at the energy requirement more integrated way. It's not only one type of energy source, but all put together. Solar, wind, nuclear, traditional fossil fuel, right? I think the key is, like the chemical plant, some of these workloads, you really can't afford to have a downtime. So you have to have this integrated availability of power. I think the reference was made in terms of the open access, right? So how do you get maybe the same data center getting power from two different grids, so that if one grid goes down, second is available, right? So I think these are some activities which we will have to look at. I mean, and now when you come to AI data center, PU is only one factor, but then all these other factors have started coming in. What's your carbon footprint? What's your percentage of renewable energy coming into your consumption? So I think, and then as technology progresses, I guess whatever you buy for the data center, there are a lot of stuff goes into the data center. I mean, not only the IT load, but chillers and coolers and air conditioning and everything else. So again, go with those products which are a lot more energy friendly or carbon neutral. So there are some decisions, I think, at a policy level we continue to do to help reduce the consumption itself, and then continue to make commitments to the more renewable energies.
So are you on track to achieve your goal of 2030?
2030, yes. Yes.
So is it looking, is it easy, is it difficult, the transition?
No, I mean, obviously it's not easy, but I think some of the policies are helping. Some of the cost coming down, what we heard, I think that also will help. You of course have to factor into some of the supply chain challenges at times, which is nobody could envisage. But I think we should say we are on track for getting 100% from renewable by 2030.
Good, that is like 4 years away. So, cool. Coming to, Mr. Venkatadiri, about chemical industry and about manufacturing, you spoke about China Plus One strategy. India wants to come ahead really up the curve on manufacturing. We are coming up the manufacturing value chain. Costing is an important part of, of that. The cost of power, we heard earlier from the chief guest, about cost of power. How do you see that fitting into the overall scheme of things for the manufacturing sector, specifically for chemicals industry? And how do you kind of make it better when competing against China?
Uh, See, one of the critical things that there are, I would say, there are two kind of pressure points. If I look at it, one is cost, and second, given that we need to work on our sustainability goals, so there is obviously a balancing that we need to do to make sure that both of it are taken care of. Now, I will answer it from one, what the industry is doing and can do, and what is it that the policymakers have to do. Because if we have to succeed as a country, all of us have to be aligned. Now, many a times, cost and making sure that we are sustainable are not necessarily conflicting, but they need to have a greater alignment. It's more an alignment issue than rather than conflict. Now, what is critical is there that every company today must start with how do they become more power efficient. Like what Avinash mentioned, is there that how do we become more power efficient? And today, many companies are trying their best to become power efficient. There are modern technologies of equipments that have come in which are far more energy efficient, and how do we move to those kind of technologies? That's a very crucial thing. Power audits, how do we make sure that you reduce your consumption? So that is at the base level. The second important part of it is there that we spoke about multiple sources of energy that are available. How do we make sure that we have proper open access? How do we, sometimes use, either power from multiple sources, or we use bioenergy, or we use, any of the whether it is buying from somebody, or solar, or wind, etc. So that's a second way of how do you balance out the cost part of it, because today with the government support, some of those newer technology renewable have become far cheaper. So hence a lot of us have actually started leveraging that opportunity that has come in. That's a second important part of it. And surely I think as future goes along, we all expect that someday hydrogen and other things will happen. So that's also going to be a very relevant part of managing the cost and yet becoming more sustainable. Now, what is important is there that along with that, there needs to be a proper policy framework, and that's something which is important is there that the reason why China became so cost effective, even if you go back 20, 30 years back, the government actually subsidized quite a lot of things. And that is how they were very export competitive. Now today, what is happening is there that I can see that the power cost is going up in India and will continue to go up because of all of these demands. Now if India has to be globally competitive, how do we make sure that we are energy competitive? I mean, that's a critical input cost for a chemical industry. Many chemical industry, energy is a big cost, more than the raw materials. So I talked about these three things which a company can do. Now, what is important from a policy perspective is there that one, one of the big technologies that has happened, and in Tata Chemicals, in Europe, in UK, we were the first company to set up a carbon capture facility, which actually is a good way of doing the decarbonization rather than letting it out, but you use it. Now, what is important is that there needs to be, India is also talking about it, we need to have a carbon capture policy and a framework. And there has to be a uniform way of charging companies for not being sustainable. For example, if I become sustainable and you are also making the same product and you are using a cheaper form, I cannot survive in the market.
Something what EU has, CBAM?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. India is also working on it, but I think it's crucial to get those policies in place so that everybody is on the same plane within the country. Now, the second issue is there that while we can become equal within the country, but we still have to compete in the international market. Because today, countries like China gives certain subsidies, etc., and their kind of capacities of any plant, any chemical plant, they are massive. So obviously they have cost efficiencies internally as well as the government support. So how do we become more cost effective is also something which the government needs to consider for us to become a cost competitive nation. That's a second part of it. The third important part of it is there that we are talking about energy of different forms of energy. We need to have a common policy which is able to switch between one energy to another energy to third energy. Today, all said and done, we are talking about nuclear, we are talking about, using bioethanol for our cars. I think at some point of time, we must, as a country and a state, have an energy policy which is looking at all forms of energy. I know that there are different ministries within the government. How do we make sure that all of them work together so that there is finally energy is energy for an industry. The cost of energy, it doesn't matter whether it comes from A source or B source. Finally, the cost also matters. Quality matters, sustainability matters, all those things matters. So how do we make sure that we look at it in a packaged kind of a thing rather than look at it in isolation? So that's what I would say is the need. What is it that the industry has to do and what is it that policy makers have to do?
Yeah, I have to just ask one thing that, transition. What is the cost of transition? Because, every industry is kind of managing to transition, looking at different sources. But in terms of cost, is how feasible that transition is?
See, what is happening is there that I'll put it as, many of our traditional as companies, we have gone into wind and solar. Now, there the government has been very good in making sure that we are cost competitive. Today, obviously, solar is cheaper than traditional sources. But solar has its own disadvantage because you don't get solar energy throughout the 365 days, 24 hours, you don't get. So you cannot be solely dependent upon that. So even though solar is cheaper, wind you can have it only in some parts of the country. So hence, what is important is there that we need to be able to generate that power in a particular place and probably transfer it to all over the country so that everybody can get it at a reasonable rate. So that's important. The other crucial part of it is, I think, what the country also needs to work on for us to be competitive is there that we are talking quite about generation of power. We also need to talk about storage of power. Now, for a state generates, today we all know that Gujarat is a surplus state. Now, if others don't need it, what do they do with the stores? So it's also important, open access for transmission and also storage facility is also important. And in the transition phase, when people are becoming decarbonized, etc., in the initial phases, some kind of policy framework is to be required to make sure that certain industries get some support when they are transitioning. That's very crucial if we want to do it at a national level. Otherwise, it will be left to certain modern progressive companies will decarbonize at a cost. And companies which are less bothered about sustainability will continue to make it cheaper and then push it out. So, the important part of it is to realize that all of us move together. Otherwise, we are in a bit of a trouble.
Points, very key important points to note. So we have just 7 minutes left for the session to end. Now, I just want you to imagine a policy genie coming in and asking you to make a wish, which will be the most pressing issue from your perspective, from your industry, which you will demand from that policy genie to happen. So anything that you can ask, one most pressing issue, which you think that should come in and that will really change a lot for the industry that you come from.
There are many demands probably, but I would focus on two. One is a single window clearance. When we do data center build, you can't imagine how many different players come into picture as an ecosystem, and then various different approvals. So I think the single window clearance is one. And second, which is more long term in my opinion, we really have to think about the speed at which this demand is going up. Nobody had seen that kind of speed in the past. So we will have to have an integrated, earlier, the data center thing used to be land, connectivity, and power. That's the way it needs to be. I think that it has got changed. You first have to check where the power is then go for land and then connectivity. Because that's how important the energy and power consumption is becoming important for this industry, right? So I think the planning, the integrated planning in terms of speed, of envisaging that if the data center capacity gets tripled in next 3 years' time, are we ready to triple our energy supply, in the same speed or not? I think that's another wish I would have.
So two asks.
From my perspective, I think the need of large-scale integration and optimization of things mainly at the central government level. Today, say for example, we have Ministry of Petroleum, then we have Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. If a compressed biogas project owner or waste to energy investment company, if he has to put his capex, he has to go to 6 to 7 ministries and departments today. Although he is primarily engaged with the MNRE or MOPNG, but then there are multiple sub-departments. So I think when energy is such important to us, we need to think it in more holistic way. Like the other part of the world, we have a Department of Energy, but we have many multiple subdivisions. So we need to have a very integrated approach for energy. In that energy, oil and gas will, you are one vertical, you have an electricity as an vertical, you have new energies, green energies and multiple other resources of energies. So if that structure we put it in place at the central government level, gradually it has to come down to a state government level, and then that is how the operating level of issues like Mr. Joshi was talking about a single window, how effective and how challenging. Is it only for just a buzz line and then not really happening in the states? So this type of challenges will get nullified with it. And one more aspect, a very integrated approach again by the state government and central government in terms of dealing with the energy crisis situation. Because we cannot afford the crisis of domestic fuel. At the same time, we can't afford our industry to slow down for not availability of petroleum product and the other derivatives. So we have to have a very long-term integrated policy for both the aspects.
I'm sure it's a tough ask for the genie also to fulfill. What will be your ask?
Yeah, I think I will, something I mentioned, but I'll summarize it. See, one important thing that I talked about is that how does the country look at energy in totality? Today they fall under different ministries, etc. How do we have a energy roadmap where everybody works together with its solar, this, that, etc. All of them. That's one critical thing. As a subset of that, I think it's also important for us to have a very clear policy on last mile, open access. I think there is still quite a lot of confusion. And given that today electricity, for example, falls under state and center and all those issues, so I think something needs to be done to make everybody kind of have a common policy so that there is no deviation between state to state, etc., get into trouble. The second important part of it is there that obviously any transition that is going to take place is going to have some bit of pain for the industry. So one, there has to be policies to make sure everybody changes. At the same time also think about some kind of a protection mechanism when the change is taking place. Otherwise, there are some companies may survive, some companies, if it becomes uncompetitive, they may just shut down, and then it's not good for the country. So I would say one, the policy framework in terms of bringing all of it together and having a long-term vision with all ministries working at one block, open access, last mile connectivity, etc. And the second thing is that a transition pathway for the industry to be able to move to the goals that the country wants.
All very important points for policymakers to take note of. Thank you for raising all of them. We won't leave you so soon. We will have a quick Q&A session. I'm sure, listening to all these, you would have questions in your mind. Some would have been answered, some wouldn't have been. So I welcome all of you to kind of ask any questions that you have. We have 5 minutes to do that.
Good morning. My name is Deepak Kanulkar and I work in a strategy firm called The Good Edge. My question is specifically, Sir Venkatadri, sir, for you. You spoke about the carbon capture policy in UK. Now that the new energy policy, draft policy is being discussed, do you think that you can push the government towards looking at carbon capture policy? That is one. And in the same stead, you spoke about the energy storage. Now, the second part is, what are the tailwinds that you are expecting from the government in the energy storage domain?
See, on the carbon capture part of it, I think industry bodies like BCCI and other associations are trying to kind of put recommendations together to give inputs to the government for making that. Obviously, you know, there are already established policies which are there in different parts of the globe. And we must learn from all of them and then make ours in line with that. So I think that's something which we can separately chat, but I think there are things that one has to take care when that policy is made. Because what may happen is there that, you know, when you make such a policy, some people will get benefited and some people will get disadvantaged. So how do you look at all of them is going to be very crucial when you make that particular policy. So that's what I would respond. Yeah. Sorry, the second question was also directed to me, or? The storage part of it, sorry. See, on the storage part of it, I think, again, see, today we know that storage is a big issue because many a times plants kind of go under load shedding, etc. They cut back on the production just because there is no sufficient load. And we do know that even in our own country, for example, there are peak times and trough times, even during a day, etc. And, you know, it is very, very difficult for a power generating company to, you know, of course, my colleague, you know, from IOC, Adani, is an expert in that. It actually messes it up. So how do we create storage facility? And clearly, for example, if you look at a data center cannot operate with any fluctuation. So there has to be storage centers, you know, power storage. How the government can help out, you know, it needs to create similarly a policy for storage. Some investment support will have to be given, you know, and a lot of innovation is also required. Today we all know that hydrogen is not becoming a usable thing in cars. It's only because you cannot store it in a car. So that is going to be a big area which it has to be done by innovators for the technology part of it and by governments to help in supporting that innovation and investment.
Yeah. Uday Singhani, let me direct my question to Mr. Joshi and Mr. Karate. You know, given that Maharashtra is wanting to become the green energy hub in the country, is it realistically possible, given that we are also simultaneously trying to get investments in highly energy intensive sectors like semiconductor manufacturing, and you know, we're talking about data centers, EV vehicles. So would like to hear your views on that, and also what's happening in the green hydrogen and the pumped hydro areas.
I think Maharashtra is leading many initiatives in terms of what we are talking about, green and new energies resources. When you have to start it right from the EV policies, Maharashtra has taken lead at the national level. They have provided ample support in terms of the industrial lands and corridors. When you talked about the waste to energy, that has been also been supported by Maharashtra. Recently, they have launched an compressed biogas policy. in terms of CFA plus other OPEX support. This is also a good initiative. Government of Maharashtra have engaged their companies like various companies of MSCB for the hydrogen and new capex investment in those aspects, having an PPEs, etc. So I must compliment and thank Government of Maharashtra for those initiatives. However, it's also important that when we think it from Maharashtra point of view, it is a larger responsibility in Maharashtra, being the most economically developed state of the country. So the faster rate of adoption, maybe and more modern policies and a good blend of private and public partnership in all the aspects of these activities can also be a value-added activities. Maybe for data center and ITEs, Mr. Joshi can comment about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think recently this whole green data center policy got extended beyond Mumbai to the rest of the Maharashtra, right? I think that's a right direction to get more incentives for industry to come and participate. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. We heard some time back about the PPAs we have or MOUs what we have signed around, let's say, nuclear energy. Right, the whole megawatt capacity from 15,000 to 30,000 to now 45,000. I think again those are the steps in right direction. Does that mean that everything will get done exactly on time? I mean, we all have to be pragmatic about this, that this will require a proper execution, policy, collaboration with the industry. But I do think we have an opportunity. I mean, today Maharashtra is kind of a data center capital of India. If we have this integrated policy of looking at this entire digital economy and digital infrastructure, we have a potential to probably become one of the best in class in the world, and not necessarily only in India, because I think all the ingredients for that are available. The policy is helping, and there is a demand. So there is enough business case to support that, I would say.
Yeah. My question is more like, how do you think it's going to strike the balance? Because on one side, it is trying to attract investments in very highly energy intensive sectors like semiconductor manufacturing or data centers or EV vehicles. And on the other side, its plan is to become the green energy hub, not only of the country, but probably, as you said, of the world. So how do you think that balance is going to be achievable? Do you see?
I may not be able to answer that question on behalf of government, but I guess this is not only us who are having this issue. I mean, all of us have this. How do you look at this? Do you look at this as or do you look at this as and? That's what I think we'll have to look at, right?
Strike a balance, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Narendra Tare from Siemens Limited. Of course, I wanted to ask a question about the nuclear policy, which you answered shortly. But maybe another question is, are you actually deploying the green energy, and what are those challenges which you might be facing to have a reliability or the quality power for data centers? What
yes.
are those pain points you are right now, let's say, facing?
I missed mentioning this. So we are also doing a pilot right now about the battery storage in one of the data centers for the exact same reason, that the reliability, availability, right? Now I mentioned some time back about our investments in solar and wind plants to feed to the grid, right? So those are some steps. The specific challenges, supply chain challenge is one right now, and as a result of that, the cost escalation is another challenge, right? These are the two challenges we have to face, and they become super critical for us in terms of getting the data center build out on time, right? I think that's probably I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that thought-provoking discussion. I would like to request Mr. Sandeep Khosla, Director General, Bombay Chamber, to please present mementos to our speakers and moderator as a token of appreciation. A round of applause for the panel discussion. Our moderator, Dr. Kiran Somavanshi. Avinash Joshi. my apologies, K.R. Venkatadri, Mr. Avinash Joshi, and Dr. Atul Kharate. A round of applause for the panels. I request everyone to please join us for a group photo.